Good evening, everyone. Everybody became very quiet all of a sudden. Anyway, thank you so much for coming, and I'm very excited and delighted to have Roshi Bernie Glassman here this evening. It's a great honor. Kind of was quite amazing when we invited him that he just said yes, and he just came, and it seemed so easy. But this lecture is the first of a series of 4, and it's associated with a class that we have just begun at the Divinity School this year as a way of beginning to develop a track and a specialization in ministerial training in Buddhism in particular. This is part of a project that we've been working on for a couple of years. It's been a colloquium with students and myself. This year we also brought in Professor Cheryl Giles, who is here, there she is, who is co-teaching the course. The reason that she became involved is both her own expertise and interest in Buddhism, but also her primary role here at the Div School as being one of the primary faculty members who teaches ministry itself. And part of the idea of developing a track in Buddhism was recognizing that the Divinity School was already an outstanding place of training kinds of liberal and progressive ministry in the U.S., and that Buddhists who are now moving in very similar directions would have a lot to gain by being part of the program. And then on the other hand, the idea that perhaps Buddhists themselves and new modes of Buddhist ministry could in turn contribute something to what the Div School was already doing. And it's a very big question of what is Buddhist ministry, what's specifically Buddhist about it, what can Buddhists contribute to it. And it's a really very interesting development that's happening really around the world in different ways, certainly in Asia as well, where traditional Buddhist groups are doing all kinds of unconventional and new and really exciting things. But in the U.S., our focus is largely in the U.S., given that we're an American university. And our idea was, for the course itself, was to focus on meditation, because that's the kind of principal kind of characteristic of Buddhism as it's understood today in the West. It's probably not been always the case, but certainly today what distinguishes Buddhism as a tradition is its very highly developed system and tradition of using meditation, meditative insight. And the question was, how are major leaders in Buddhism today using and applying the insights of meditation in their ministry work? So how do you translate your experience of meditation into ways that are going to actually be applicable in chaplaincy, in social activism, in various kinds of psychotherapeutic traditions that are also beginning to draw on Buddhism as well? So that's the aim of the course. We're really excited and happy to have a very, very outstanding and extraordinary master tonight, Roshi Bernie Glassman, who has been very, very active and very primal and foundational force in American Buddhism since the 1960s. He was just telling me this evening how he has a early association with people like Allen Ginsberg and many others of that very exciting and creative moment in the 60s. His training is primarily in Zen Buddhism. His main teacher, if I'm not mistaken, is Maizumi Roshi, but he has been trained extensively in Zen practice and in Zen ministry, and has founded a very large number of groups and organizations. At the moment, his primary home is in a group called the Zen Peacemakers. We do, by the way, have some literature on his organization, which we'll give out to people who would like to look at it further. It's very accessible on the internet as well. You just can Google Zen Peacemakers and you'll see all the links that are there and the amazing kinds of things that he's been doing. He's well known for having started this really extraordinary meditation practice of bearing witness, which is actually the title of one of his major books, at Auschwitz, at the concentration camp. So really allowing something like Zen meditation to confront, some of the most difficult things that we as human beings have to think about altogether. He also has some extremely exceptional kinds of work on the street in inner cities, and he has started all kinds of extremely helpful social activist programs, which he's still in the process of doing. He has a number of books. One is called Bearing Witness. One is called Infinite Circle, is that correct? And another wonderful book, Instructions to the Cook. You can find out a lot more about his work and his writing through the internet or by contacting me. But anyway, we're really happy to have him speak to us tonight. He's going to speak for a while, and there will be several opportunities for question and answer, too. So help me welcome Roshi Bernie Glassman.
Good evening. Good evening. Good evening. Yeah, so my name is Bernie, and I generally like to start by saying I'm a boy from Brooklyn, which is Brooklyn, New York. I think there's a Brooklyn, Massachusetts too, probably, but we hold on to our Brooklyn in New York as something special. Birth of the Brooklyn Dodgers. I usually like to start by first asking you questions and not answering directly, but getting a feeling of getting a whole slew of questions so I can get a feeling of your energy and what you would like to hear about. And in the book Instructions to the Cook, it's about our training as a cook of our lives. And one of the first things we talk about in that book is getting a sense of the ingredients. And not just saying, I want to prepare this meal or give this talk or do this, before really grokking, well, what are the ingredients? And then having those ingredients, what's the best meal we can make together? And in a talk, the ingredients are all of us. So I play a role and you play a role. And if I just talk independent of you, I don't know, I haven't grokked the ingredients. But listening to Janet talk, I decided to say just a few words first, and then I'm going to ask you my questions, or your questions. I'll get ready for the questions by putting my glasses, my pen, because I used to remember all these questions, and now my memory is short-term, and I usually can't remember more than one or two, so I'll write as we go along. But I want to say a few things about myself, because I trained for a fairly long time. I've been involved in the practice of Zen since 1960, and reading about it, reading everything that was written in English from about 58. And around 1968, I moved with my family into the same block where my teacher was living, where our Zen center was living, and little by little we bought the block up. And so I did do a lot of meditation. I mean, that was just taken for granted. A lot of retreats and a lot of meditation. And then somewhere around 76, I had already had Dharma transmission, which means my teacher had empowered me as a teacher. And I was driving in a car to work. I was working at McDonnell Douglas. I was working in the space industry. And I was in a carpool, and I had an experience of the language that I use. Is I had an experience of the hungry ghosts. What I felt was this enormous number of hungry spirits and by hungry, being unsatisfied. Wanting love, wanting power, wanting money, wanting compassion, wanting love, wanting. And pretty immediate came this realization that this was all aspects of myself, crying out, I want. And I made a sort of instantaneously this inner vow came up that I'm going to spend my life trying to feed the hungry spirits, which is feeding myself. And that led me to decide that I was not going to stay within a Zen center. Until that time, I had ordained, and I had decided that I was going to spend my life. I had a family, wife and children, and she had ordained as a Zen priest. But I had, until that point, felt that I was going to stay at the Zen Center of Los Angeles and work with my teacher, and I was his sort of right-hand man, and that we would keep everybody there, and we would just build and become this sort of pressure cooker place for practice and study. But after that experience and this internal vow that I need to work for all the aspects of myself, all the hungry spirits of the universe, I realized that I had to learn how to take, this is what I needed to do personally, how to take the upayas, the expedient means, the things that I had learned in my training in Zen, which is not just meditation, many other things. What do those things mean in the world of business, in the world of education, in the world of social action, in the world of baseball, in the whole world? That the core of the understanding, as my understanding of my experience, is that the essence of Zen, the essence of Buddhism, is the realization and actualization of the oneness of life, of the interconnectedness of life. And that can come about in many ways, and it can come about for many people in many traditions and walks of life, and it's not confined to. But that was, for me, the content of Shakyamuni Buddha's experience, and the whole school of Buddhism coming from that. For me, that was the essence, and it wasn't to propagate some particular religion or some particular form. It was to help us get that realization and actualization of the oneness of life and the interconnectedness of life. And so in Zen, many forms developed to help realize that. And one of the main things that we were aiming at, or that we aim at, is to take away our conditioning that doesn't allow us to see that that's the fact of life. Just like intrinsically, we all know we have belly buttons, except for Adam and Eve, but we all know we have belly buttons. But because of our armor, the clothes that we have, we don't necessarily see it. You can see it, just take away the clothes. So the expression, the realization of Shakyamuni Buddha, of the oneness and interconnectedness of life, he said, it's intrinsic, that's what it is. We don't see it because we're covered up with our conditioning, with our thoughts, our concepts. Take those away, and you just see it. It's just there. That's what it's nothing that's new that's being given. It is there. It's been my experience. And so the methodology in Zen is, how do we help folks to strip away their conditioning to get to what we call the space of not knowing. I've founded something we call the Zen Peacemakers. It's a Zen Peacemakers Sangha. It's a federation of groups but the three tenets, which is pretty much the only thing that binds us together of that Zen Peacemakers is first not knowing that we are going to experience the state of no conditioning. It can be experienced. I state that just as a matter of fact. And everybody can experience that. And that coming from that state of total unconditioning, anything and everything can be born. And you're free to look at every situation in a completely new and creative way. Our second 10 is bearing witness, and that is coming to the situation in that open way. Now, let's totally grok it. Total empathy, or empathy is not quite the right word. I like grokking as a word, but the typical Buddhist Zen language is become it, be it. That's not so easy to understand. Grokking is probably a lot easier to understand, but maybe not. But anyway, get rid of the technical lingo is to get rid of the gap between subject and object. That's also not so easy to understand. So to grok it, and I'm using the word bearing witness for that. And then the third is my feeling that once out of that automatically comes up loving actions, that you can't not do something about it, that loving actions occur. So, and this simple way of seeing that whole thing, which poor Chris Queen has heard me do a lot, but I'm going to do it again, is think of yourself as one body. You probably don't normally think of yourself as one body because you are. There's the same idea within the one body of the universe. There you don't think of yourself as the whole thing, but so I start with a simple analogy of looking at your own body. Now imagine that the right hand has some kind of illness in which manifests as the right hand thinking that it is separate from this body. It's not part of it. It's not interconnected. And in fact, gives itself a name. So this is Harry. And this is the left hand. Did I say right hand? That's also part of our Zen training. So now the right hand has a similar illness. Doesn't know that it's interconnected with Bernie. And in fact thinks it's Mary. So we've got Harry, Mary, and Bernie. 3 different objects, just like we normally think, well, there's a fan, there's me, there's you. We count different objects, and we don't see that we're interconnected necessarily. A mother, when she just gives birth, feels very interconnected with the child. It doesn't take too long before starts seeing the child as separate, but certainly not at that moment of birth. And if the child cries, it's not like, oh, should I do something about it? There's automatic. That is, when there's no separation, when there's this, not only realization, but actualization of the oneness, actions happen immediately. There's no thinking about it. So you got, here's Harry, here's Mary, here's Bernie. Harry gets gashed, and his blood is pouring out. And Mary says, I just got a new white dress. That's pretty messy. I don't know if I want to get involved with that. And it turns around. Or Mary says, I'm not a doctor. I don't have a medicine kit with me. What can I do? Or Mary says, if I go and do something and somebody sees me, they may think I did it, and then they're going to sue me, and I'm going to get a... So there's a lot of kind of deciding that can go on. If Harry and Mary have a realization and an actualization of the oneness of Bernie, where they drop those ego structures, those labels, and now it's just Bernie. and now that bleeding happens, this hand immediately does something. If it has a bandage, if it has a handkerchief, if it has nothing, it still does something. It does the best it can. With the ingredients it has, it does the best it can. It cannot do otherwise. With that separation, Mary can walk away, Harry bleeds to death, Bernie dies, Mary dies. Another aspect of that same separateness is that it could happen in the world of social action. Bernie's the stomach gets hungry. Oh, I need food, I need food. Mary says, I'm going to be a bodhisattva. I'm going to feed Bernie. Harry says, oh, no, I want to be the one to get the merit. I'm going to feed Bernie. And they start fighting. Who's going to feed Bernie? And Bernie starves, and Bernie dies, and Harry dies, and Mary dies. That cannot happen with the oneness of Bernie. The stomach grumbles. A hand that's closest to the food picks it up, brings it to the mouth. It's all automatic. It doesn't say, mouth, do you want the right hand or the left hand to bring it? It doesn't go through all that kind of logic and thinking. It's loving actions. So for me, in my own personal life, the meditation that I did and that I do, I don't meditate to gain something, to gain enlightenment, to gain wisdom. I don't, because I don't breathe to live. Because I'm alive, I breathe. Because I'm alive, I meditate. Because I'm hungry, I eat. I don't eat to grow up. It's because I'm alive, I eat. So for me, it's gotten to the place where that's just a part of the day. But out of that, and I don't say, and I, as a Zen teacher, would not say that everybody's got to meditate. As a Buddhist, I would not say that everybody's got to meditate. My tradition puts a lot of emphasis in it, and it's been amazing for me. And if somebody wants to study with me, they're going to have to wind up, doing some meditation. But I don't say that's necessary or the only way. So I'm sort of a heretic. But I do say, if you want to be a Buddhist, you have to realize and actualize the oneness of life. That's what the word Buddha means, to awaken. That doesn't mean you have to belong to any kind of religion. Any religions, for me, are ways of celebrating celebrating the tradition. And you can celebrate it as a Jew, as a Christian, as a Muslim, as a Buddhist. But you cannot be a Buddhist without working on awakening, because that's what Buddhism is about. That's what the word means. So to awaken and awaken to what? For me, it's not to awaken to the fact that, I have to be a good person in somebody's definition. It's awakening to the interconnectedness and oneness of life. And you can't stop at that. You have to actualize it. The founder of the Japanese Shingon tantric sect, called Shingon, Kobadaishi, said that the way you tell the depth of a person's enlightenment is how they serve others, not how much they meditate. One of my teachers, a man named Yasutani Roshi, said you can go into doll shops and see dolls sitting in meditation 24 hours a day. That doesn't mean that they realize the oneness of life. So out of that work, for me, when I walk in the streets and I see somebody, that's me. And so I have been drawn into working with all aspects of my life that's bleeding. I can't walk past the bleeding and say, that's not me. and it'll be taken care of. Now, so that led me into many paths, and since I'm a young man, I'm still exploring those paths, and my own personal works have arenas that I've gotten drawn into have been in inner city work and street homelessness and poverty and conflict resolution. That is where people are killing each other. Work in the Middle East and Ireland and places like that. Those that draw me, and I've attracted many people that we work together. Many of them are talented in many other things. So one of your next speakers, or I'm not sure when she's coming, Joan Halifax, her work is contemplative care. One of my students, Fleet Mall, his work is prison work. He was in prison for 15 years himself, so he knows about the rumblings from the inside. He started the first hospice in prison. He started the first Dharma network in prison. I ordained him in prison. He was in a in the federal hospital in Springfield, Missouri. And now we're going to be starting to do homeless work in Springfield, Massachusetts. So it's Peter Matheson is another Dharma successor, is heavily involved in environmental work. So I've attracted Pat O'Hara in gender issues, gay issues. And many of the Dharma students are involved in strictly meditation and those kind of practices. All of them are working with bringing together and realizing the oneness of life and different fields. Okay, so now let me get some questions so that I can continue in a more intelligent way. I just gave you a little forespite of who I am. Yes, sir.
Now, what I understand about Buddhism is it's not a religion. It has no God. Now, how do you interact in a world which is filled with religions like Islam and Buddhism, Christianity and Judaism, and for that matter, Hinduism? And how do you come about what you're talking about, oneness? The operation of the oneness of all these ideologies.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay. Next question. Yeah.
Can you tell us about meditating at the camps?
Meditating. You mean like Auschwitz? Yeah. Many kinds of camps. Okay. Yeah. Back there.
In Burma, a very Buddhist country, there's so much suffering and oppression. And I was wondering how you would see social action working through Buddhism in that context.
How I would see social action in Burma?
Or how would you do the process of awakening through Buddhism in that kind of country?
Yeah, let me fully understand what you're saying. Is it because it's a Buddhist country and you see suffering that you want to know?
So there were basically two types of Buddhism.
A little louder, please.
Sorry. So in a country, there are two types of Buddhism. The traditional kind, and the ones that, just donating merit and so on, and another kind of practice and realization. And the two are basically in conflict, meaning that they don't translate into one another, and people don't understand Buddhism as a form of social action. So how could you
Another question? Yeah.
Thank you for coming in. The first part was very good. But I was wondering, as I work protesting the war in Iraq, I find it very hard to maintain equanimity when in the face of stupidity.
You went in the face of?
The stupidity. That's my not.
She has a hard time maintaining equanimity in the face of stupidity, she said.
So what's the question?
I
mean, that was a statement.
Well, it is, but I feel, in meditation, I'm looking or it gives me, one of the gifts is equanimity, and it seems that the anger that I feel is counterproductive.
You want equanimity. Yeah.
I'm curious as to how you can talk about actualizing oneness, and this is maybe almost philosophical. I don't know if you can talk about how we can sort of conceive of what that means as concretely as possible, and what the role of the intellect could be in that, and then also the relationship between the mind and the body and the importance of that.
Sure. Okay. Yeah.
Do you have any suggestions for reading, especially for beginners, people in Buddhism kindergarten?
Beginners' books in Buddhism.
Well, books for beginners.
Books for beginners in Buddhism.
Yeah. Or any suggestion.
Okay. Yes. Do you have your hand up or you're?
How would you speak to, if at all, to a Tibetan Buddhist friend a week after Katrina saying, "Hey, that big gathering you're having with the visiting teacher, wouldn't it be great to have a can collection or a little donation to send to New Orleans?" And he said, "Well, if someone would organize it, okay, but we're focusing on bringing these Dharma teachers over to spread the Dharma, teach people to fish instead of." And I kind of should I have left that one alone, or was it something for me to say, maybe we can be more active in our charity? How would you handle something like that?
Sure.
Friend,
Yeah. Yeah.
In many Buddhist traditions, awakening is understood as a kind of gaining of knowledge. Buddha is talked about as omniscient, yet in your lingo is called not knowing, as I understood what you were saying.
Yeah.
Can you elaborate on that?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Didn't you raise your hand?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Sure.
No problem.
How do we keep our practice fresh over time? Someone who's been practicing for a while, living in the Zen Center, how do we keep this quality of don't know mind, beginner's mind?
Okay. Yes.
I'd like to hear how you apply your practice to large-scale conflict resolution, say in the Middle East or Sudan, or how would you approach those issues?
Yes.
How do you see the killing of animals in the world? How do you, how do you think of that in terms of the oneness of life, or just basically what do you think about the killing of animals?
Right. Yes.
You spoke earlier about when you feel the oneness of everything, that you cannot help but to act. What about those times when you do not feel that oneness, yet also see a need?
Okay. Yes.
What's your sense of the effectiveness of teaching Buddhist arts and ministry in the university?
Say it again.
What's your sense of how effective it is to teach Buddhist arts and ministry in the university?
Okay. Yes.
You mentioned your assessment of the various upayas in your life.
Uh-huh.
I'm curious, as you reflect on the narrative of your life, what you make of the upaya of your being born as a Jew.
Reflect on the merits, is that what you said?
Of the upayas?
Yeah.
It's about making an assessment. I'm curious about what you make of the upaya of being born as a Jew.
Of course, I didn't invent that upaya, but okay. The upaya of being born. as a Jew. Very important. Fine. Yes?
I'm interested in Buddhist perspective on what in Christian terms would be called the sacredness of life. Decisions like whether to pull the plug on a brain-damaged patient, or whether to let a severely retarded child get the operation it would need to live or let it die, those kinds of decisions. How does the oneness of life impinge on those kinds of things?
Sure. Yes, sir.
How do you see the role of meditation in achieving that state where, say, Mary automatically comes to be able to carry? She of course understands it intellectually, but going beyond that viscerally, is meditation an important factor in achieving that state of oneness?
Yes.
When you were a businessman, did you ever have to sue anybody?
Did I ever have to what?
Did you ever have to sue anybody?
Sue or screw? Sue? Sue?
Yeah, and if you're, like, from a Buddhist perspective, when you're in such a conflicted situation in business,
Mm-hmm.
you know, how do you go about resolving it
Mm-hmm.
and not suing somebody?
Yeah. Okay. Good thing I brought a lot of paper.
You said earlier something along the lines of meditation isn't for everyone. Meditation is not the only way to achieve this state of oneness. And I'm curious as to what other ways or means you would recommend.
Sure. Okay. Okay, we can. I can ramble for a while, and then we can open it up to discussion again. Teaching in universities, that's an easy one. I just started something called the Maizumi Institute to teach this stuff. I think it's a great idea. What's a bad idea? There are so many schools of Buddhism. Buddhism it's an ism, so these are all ways of awakening. And then throughout all the years, there have been many people that have had many different ideas of how to do it. And so you found lots of different schools. There's the schools that will work on the psychology of what this is all about. There are schools that work on the teachings of the sutras. There are schools that work on the use of chanting. There are schools like Zen, which is specifically oriented at meditation. Zen means meditation. There's tantric schools. So different people have, throughout the ages, have come up with different schemes, and they try them out. And some people and what's fascinating about the world is that we're all so different. Somebody told me, Jim Morton told me, and I don't know who the guy is, but it must be a biologist, who proved that every cell is unique. Now, I've always wondered about how people know that every snowflake is unique and, all those things. But there's supposedly a way of proving it. I'm sure somebody here knows how to prove all that. But the point became that since every cell is unique, then everything is unique, which means there's nothing unique about uniqueness. And that's the Buddhist philosophy. And so we come up with many different ways of how to do that. In Zen, it's created all these funny ways which attracted people, some by shouting, some by banging, some by things like koans, paradoxes. I've done a lot with what I call plunges, taking people into places where their rational mind does not know how to deal with it. Auschwitz is one. But you got to set it up right. There are a lot of people that go to Auschwitz and look at it and say, this will never happen again, or how awful those people were, or this or that, and leave. We don't do that. We bring people from many different cultures, many different religions. We bring children of SS officers, children of survivors. We bring a huge, diverse group. And we sit together, and we do some chanting of names of people that died there. We do services, different services in different traditions. But one of the big, and it's organized such that in the first day you're completely overwhelmed. The place itself is overwhelming. If you've ever gone to Auschwitz, was 3 different camps, Auschwitz 1, 2, and 3. 3 was a chemical plant that produced cyclone, the gas that was used in the chambers. Auschwitz 1 is now a museum. It's pretty big. Mostly was the original, the prisoners. Auschwitz originally was for the Polish intellectuals and the Polish political figures to kill them. And then it was a place to get rid of the gays and then the gypsies. And then, of course, the Jews. And so the majority of people that were killed there were Jews. But it was a huge mixture of people killed there. And so we bring the Germans, the Poles, the Jews, the Swiss had guards at the borders to keep the Jews from coming in. Every country is filled with angst, with guilt, with hate, with lots of emotions. We bring it all together. And people have to deal with each other, and then we deal in groups. Meditation is a way to allow our conditioning to fall away so that the clothes come off and we can see the belly button. The Buddhist analogy of this belly button and the clothes is that the moon is shining on the lake, but the waves on that lake are so vermished. That's a Japanese word. Vermished, that you can't see the moon, and those waves are our conditioning and our thinking process. So through meditation, that comes down until the lake is just calm, and you can just see the moon. You've taken off the armor that's protecting us from what we don't want to be involved with. So meditation is a great way of doing that. I found plunges to be fantastic. So I take people to places where the rational mind cannot deal with it. In the Zen tradition, there was something called koans, a koan system of study that was created to do the same thing. You're given a statement to work on which you cannot answer rationally. You can work on it rationally. You can't answer it rationally. So you have to go beyond that. You have to see that state. So this is answering the point of what are other methods. There are many methods. Many methods. Zen alone, as a school of meditation, has created many methods. There was a whole branch of Zen called Ikkyo School, which was based on dance and music as the methods, not on meditation. There's all kinds of stuff. But the point is, what's a way of letting us let go of our thinking that blocks our seeing the state of what is? A lobotomy is one, but it has, some bad consequences. Drugs was one. There are many things that brought people to get beyond their rational brain thinking and how to look at life. A lot of the stuff that gets invented or gets used in that way has the trap of making you conditioned to that. You then want to recreate it. And drugs has led to recreation. And the TM Maharishi said that the majority of people that got involved in this country in TM was because of drugs. They came, and it was great. It was an entry door. They came to study that practice, but then they were trapped by the drugs. And it took years and years to get beyond that. I mean, that wasn't what it's all about. So many techniques can have a residue, which prevents you from going further. It opens some window, but it creates a residue. So we're looking for pure residues. Meditation is a pure residue. I found plunges to be pure residues. So Auschwitz is a plunge. I take people into the streets. Clowning is a plunge. It doesn't have to be heavy. It could be the other way. Definitely working in hospice work, or forgetting working with hospice work. Being with a friend who's dying is a plunge. That's not something that you rationally can, but it takes you to a place of, and being a clown does. It could take you to a place that, what's going on here? And how can we then go a little deeper? So I can work with children as a clown. I work in refugee camps with children. It's an easy way to work, better than telling them, you've got to sit over there, cross your legs, or do this, or do that. There's ways of working as a clown that will bring them to the same place, I think. So after I had that particular experience in '76, my life was about what are the equivalences. Okay, in Zen we have sesshin, where we sit for 7 days, a lot of meditation, we do a lot of stuff. That's an upaya that's about 200 years old. Shakyamuni didn't do sesshin, but it became a very powerful, and I love sesshin. But what's the equivalent of that in the world of children, in the world of business, in the world of social action? And so that's been my exploration, to find out and to experiment with different ways and different things. And I like to do things, so I just jump into those arenas. I lost my glasses. If I don't find my glasses, I can't read your notes. Anybody see my glasses? Are they on my head? Here they are. I wrote something that says no and then friends. So somebody was saying, how do I tell my friend not to do something? Or, I mean, I don't tell anybody to do anything or not to do anything. My life is about doing. If you think there's something that should be done, do it. Why do you want to worry about getting your friends to do it or not do it? At least that's me. So I do not spend time, again, I got to preface this by me. I think everything that people do is great. They're all different things. Personally, I enjoy doing things. So if I think something should be done in a certain way, I don't spend my time convincing others that that's the way to do it, or yelling at people who don't do it that way. I do it that way. So I have not been involved in protest groups. I look at a situation and say, what am I going to do about it? I developed a huge program in Yonkers, New York, working with the homeless in a way that I felt made sense, a very holistic approach, and it has, in fact, worked very well. And then at some point in my life, I said, what do I do next? And so what I did is, it was my 55th birthday, 12 years ago. And my birthday is January 18th. And I decided I would do a retreat at a power spot in our country with the question of, what do I do next? What do I do? Do I do this, continue doing what I'm doing? What do I do? It was not how somebody else should do things. It's what... And I invited people to join me for my birthday party, if they wished. And they had to work on the question of what would they do next? What are they going to do in their lives next? That was the thing to sit with that week. So there was about 20 of us, and we sat on the steps of the White House, because that's a power spot in this country. And that particular year, January 18th, turned out to be the coldest in 50 years, and we were covered with snow sitting on the steps, and all the traffic had stopped. Congress was out of session because it was too cold. Nobody was walking outdoors. And we sat for the week of what are we going to do. Out of that was born the Zen Peacemaker movement. And my working with groups around the world that are doing these different types of works to encourage them to talk to each other, to share what we're doing, to help each other. And periodically I keep doing that. What do I do next? So that's the only, advice I can give on that is do things. And I know many people that say, I can't because I'm not enlightened enough, or I don't have enough money, or I don't have enough time. That's a big one. Or I'm not educated enough. Or, so when I get hungry, I go to the refrigerator, I open the door, and I see what's there. I don't say, hey, there's no cheese there. I'm not going to eat. I'll starve. I don't say, oh, there's no tomatoes. Forget about it. I'm not going to deal with... I go to the refrigerator. Oh, look what's here. Let's make something and eat. And then, boy, it would be nice to have some other things. I'll go out and get some other things and put them in the refrigerator. So I don't like to get involved with what I don't have. I like to say, what do I have, no matter how big or small? This is what I have. What's the best I can offer at this time? And then do that. So I'm very focused on what I should do, and not what anybody else should do, or how they should be. How do you keep it fresh? I keep it fresh by exactly that. At any moment, I say, oh, what's the ingredients? Okay, let's put it together, make the best meal possible, offer it. And now that it's offered, I say, oh, what's the ingredients? What should I do now? What's the best meal I can make? Offer it. You got to offer it. You got to. And what's interesting is that as you offer things, people will come. If you don't offer anything, nobody comes because nothing's been offered. Why should they come? But if you offer something, no matter how small, somebody's going to come. And now you've grown. You've now a little bigger group. And now the ingredients are a little bit more, you can do a little bit more, and little by little it grows. If you want to take care of the whole problem, as they say in Japanese, geikizunterei. Go with health. I mean, I don't know how to take care of the whole problem. All I know is how to look at the ingredients I have, how to make the best meal I can offer, and offer it. That's all I can do. I don't know how to fix anything. I don't know if anything I offer is useful or helpful. That's not my issue. My issue is, what are the ingredients? What's the best meal I can make? And I want to offer it. I can't get involved in, is it good or bad? I don't know. Is it going to help or hinder? I don't know. And I'm not going to let that stop me from looking at the ingredients and making my offering. I'll just do the best I can. And who can blame anybody for doing that? And when people ask me about any kind of big issues, like how you're going to resolve conflict in this world, I think a lot about raising children. I have 2 kids. And when they were born, Summerhill was the big thing. So we studied Summerhill. And of course, Dr. Spock was always a big thing. So we had Dr. Spock. But what struck me is that we've been having kids on this planet for a long time. And every so many years, there's a new handful of books written about how to raise kids. And some become very fashionable. But I don't know anybody that's ever figured out how to raise kids. Now, it seems like we should have, right? I mean, it's millions of years, and it's the same thing over and over. Why can't we figure out how to, with all these experts? So now we can't do that, and somebody's going to say, well, let's figure out how to end hostility in the world. My first wife's father was a rabbi from St. Paul, and he told about, and he's actually from Poland, but he talked about this time that the Tsar went in to visit a hospital, and all these soldiers were all banged up, and some dying, and different degrees of. And he went to the first guy and he said, "What would you like?" And he said, I would like peace on earth. And he went to the second guy, "What would you like?" "I would like all the wars to end." He went to the third guy, "What would you like?" "I would like everybody in this hospital to be healthy." He went to the next guy, says, "What would you like?" And the guy said, "A corned beef sandwich." I know how to make a corned beef sandwich. If I have corned beef. And if I don't, I'll offer a tomato sandwich. Whatever I have, that's what I'm going to offer. But I don't know how to do the other things. I am involved in a lot of interfaith work. I work with people of many traditions. I don't work with the traditions. I work with the people. I always tend to work with people, with animals, with rocks, with trees. I don't work with the classifications that we give to a class of things. So I don't know what it means by Buddhist religion. What is that? But show me a Buddhist, and and we can sit down and figure out what we mean together. Or Islam. I mean, I've worked with many sheikhs. But not with Islam. I've worked with the sheikhs. They happen to be Islamic, and we can talk. And there are some people that we can't talk. So I work with people. It's very concrete. And social action is very concrete. I like to think of a spiritually based, and since this is a Buddhist track, we can say Buddhist-based social action. I work in spiritually based social action. I do a lot of interfaith work. I've studied in many different traditions. I'm born Jewish. I studied a lot in that tradition. My Sufi name is Abdul Salam. I'm a Zen teacher. I've lived in Catholic monasteries. I've done Vedanta studies. I have a Vedanta mantra. I've done a lot of different things. But the only thing I can teach in those traditions is Zen. That's a path I've accomplished. How did I start this? I lost where I was going. Yeah, it started off with people, not traditions, and then I had my brain came up with something, led me into this anyway, I don't know where that. My son, when he was very young, he used to tell jokes. He told jokes all the time, and some of them made no sense. And we'd say, "What is that joke?" And he would say, "It's a non-getting joke." So, anyway, let's. How are we doing? We have some time. Let me look at my notes. Burma. I mean, Burma is something that's going on now. We all love Tibet. Tibet was, they used to kill each other in Tibet. You're a Tibetan student, but Tibetan Buddhism, I mean, a wonderful friend of mine, the great Rinpoche, was in a car accident that people felt the other Rinpoches had sort of gotten rid of him. Just because you're Buddhist or just because you're anything doesn't mean anything as far as I'm concerned. What means something as far as I'm concerned is how you act. What are your actions? We can tell by the actions whether your actions are all self-centered, whether they're family-centered, whether they're clan-centered, group-centered, tribe-centered, nation-centered, country-centered, world-centered, universe-centered. That's how we tell how we've actualized the oneness of life. If all you're taking care of is your family, that's your oneness. If all you're taking care of is the world, that's your oneness. If all you're taking care of is your tribe, that's your oneness, your school. We can see. It's obvious. You just look around and see what's... And you can experience the oneness of the whole thing. The ganze Mishpacha, the whole family. It can be experienced. And just because you call yourself something doesn't mean you've experienced anything. I happen to think meditation is very important. It's one of the... It's for me, it's like, is food important to living? Meditation, for me, is a way of keeping the space clean. How do you see the ingredients if you can't see the space, if it's all messy and all over the place? Meditation is a state of being. Meditation, for me, is that oneness of life. Now, it doesn't mean that everybody who meditates is doing what I call meditation. You can take meditation and use it to be a tonic, or have the same role as a good gin and Collins at the end of a day's work. That's not what it's about. But it can be, and there's a lot of people that do that to feel relaxed, to feel balanced. I mean, there's got a lot of physical stuff. That's not my world, but there are worlds of people now, and it's big deals. I mean, you can see how meditation is going to help your stress. It's going to do a lot of good stuff, and that's all good. It's all good. It's not what I work in. I work in the use of meditation to see the wonders of life. That's another. We all have our own gigs, and but I don't like it to end there. I don't like it to end there. Did I ever have to sue anybody? No, I didn't. Killing of animals, killing of life. Now, in the Zen, and I say Zen, but in the lineage that I trained in, we study precepts. We tend to call them aspects of life. And the first major one is non-killing. And here's where we get in trouble with a lot of other Buddhist groups and with a lot of other people. Because we come from the perspective that this is all one body, all interconnected. For this thing to exist, it is constantly breathing and destroying microbes. It's wearing clothes that were made from animals, vegetables, and minerals that gave up their existence for this to be. It eats. It eats. Whatever it eats is the giving up of existing of something. So in our work with the precepts, we spend time on how do you minimize the destruction of life so that life goes on. And what does that mean? When bushes are growing, how do you prune so that life goes on? If you don't do anything, it dies. If you do too much, it dies. And we don't make distinctions between animal, vegetable, and mineral. We're all life. But we put emphasis on how do you minimize the destruction of life so that life goes on. That's not so simple. Okay. So one of my pet peeves, we were just talking about it at supper, is that I do a lot of work in homelessness, and I don't know of any Buddhist shelter or soup kitchen, food kitchen in the country. You're talking about creating an engaged Buddhist track in ministry, and I think Buddhists have a lot to offer in that, and I think it has to be offered. I think it can't be just talked about. I like to see the offerings, and I don't see that many offerings. There are now, and it's taken Chris Queen a lot of work to write these books to encourage people that this is okay. I mean, there was a time, I don't know, this may be hard to believe, but I was interviewed once by a leading Buddhist magazine that said, well, you know, Buddhism is not about social action. Shouldn't be doing that. And I said, is that so? And then the person said, what happens if people would become like Mother Teresa's? And I said, oh, is that bad? So that was like a stigma, that if we allowed Buddhism to move away from meditation and into working with people, that we might become just another Christian group. I couldn't believe it. I can't believe it. And I thank God, as a Buddhist that doesn't believe in God, I thank God that the times have changed. And it is acceptable. It's become acceptable in the last X amount of years. You might be able to pin down how many years, but it became acceptable to do social action. There was a time that I felt that I would have to leave the Zen tradition because I was becoming a bad model in doing social action. And my wife at that time, my previous wife who died, Jishu, said to me, you can't. It's exactly because that's the issue that you've got to remain as a Zen teacher and doing that work so that people will feel it's okay to do that work, that it's not wrong, and that you don't have to just sit meditating. That, in fact, that shouldn't be what all you do. And you can't just do that. I don't care who you are, whether you're sitting in a cave, whether you're a hermit, you've got to do some other things. You've got to feed yourself. That's social action. You're feeding the oneness. You got to pee. That's social action. You're going to just blow up if you don't do it. You know, so you can't. I don't care what you are. You can't act. You can't do loving actions. Everybody's sphere of doing it is different. But if we think, and we did think in the early days of American Buddhism, that that's not Buddhist. That's crazy. And so it moved to where it was okay, and now it's got to move further to where there's ministries about it, where my wife just recently led a street retreat. This is how it came up in suburb. My wife recently led a street retreat in Springfield. We've been doing Springfield street retreats around the world for a long time, and that's become a tradition within my tradition. But she led one, and I hadn't been on the streets for a while, and I felt I had to go, and I joined her. And it was the first time I ran into the homeless of a community being a community. In New York, there are some folks that sort of wind up being friends with each other, but there's no community out there. And I haven't seen that any place. And I've done many, many street retreats in many, many cities, many places. But here I felt community. And one of the reasons that I felt community, I think, was that the Christian community, the various churches in Springfield, had gotten together and organized it such that every day and for every meal, there was a meal being served. At a couple of different venues, but every day, some church, it was organized, which meant that the street people went from place to place for each meal. It was the same place. So they were going together. They've been doing that for X amount of years. They've become a community. It's fantastic. So there's a lot that could be done with working with that community. They said to us that, because we were new, there was a group of about 12 of us, and they spotted us right away. And I always tell people, never lie. Always, if somebody asks you something, always tell the truth. And so, they heard who we are. They accepted us into the family right away. It was really sweet. And when it was over and we were about to leave, one of the leaders of there are leaders among the homeless. One of them said, we invited him to do Gated Sweet Nectar. We do Gated Sweet Nectar each day. At the final one, we invited him to join us, and he said, you guys are the only people that have ever come and seen what it's like. Joined us. And he said, we're really going to miss you. Well, they won't miss us for too long because we're going to start doing work in Springfield with the homeless and to move things out, to change. Okay, thank you. Yeah, I can.
We have time for a few more questions.
If you want to leave, please leave. Yeah, I can't until you don't ask any more questions. But if there's any...
People would like to leave, and then a smaller group if you would like to ask a few more questions. Wonderful.
Oh.
Yeah, I tried to show that too, but
I missed the ingredient. Yeah, if you want to move closer. I was giving a talk in San Diego to a number of activists. It was at a Unitarian Universalist church, but it was all the activists of San Diego. And there was somebody in the back row, and they said they couldn't hear me. So I spoke louder, and then it started echoing, how the mics feedback, and they still couldn't hear. And I said, there's empty seats here. How about moving up a little closer? No, we don't want to move closer. I said, well, we've got a couple of options. If I keep speaking louder, you were going to all hear this feedback and echoing, and everybody's going to have a distorted thing. Or you could just move up closer. No, we can't move up closer. California. Churches. Yes, sir.
Several people asked you about equanimity, and I think you answered
equanimity.
Directly by saying that when you act because you must act, and then you don't really, if I understand you correctly, you don't really weigh the consequences of that action. So I guess in a way, equanimity is not an issue.
Yeah. I meant to ask go a little bit further into equanimity. I agree with you. And what do you mean by equanimity? Do you mean spaced out? Not you, in general. Sometimes when people use the word equanimity, they're looking for some kind of spaced out thing where I'm always calm and never screaming and yelling and doing. But Zen is not that way. Zen is action oriented. And but the point is, here's how we define equanimity. There's actually some koans all around it, dealing with that issue. And the metaphor we like to use is, that those tops that you go, you pull them and then they go spinning around. If the top, if it's sitting just right, if it's spinning just centered, everything's right, it looks like it's still. But it ain't still. So we're looking for the still point within that movement, within that big action. That's what we call equanimity. And so from the outside, it may not look like equanimity, if that's how if you define it as being calm and this and that. We don't train on that. We train to have a still point within tremendous action. The earth looks like it's not doing anything, but we know it's spinning around and it's moving around the sun, and the whole solar system is moving around, well, at least we think it does, around the galaxy. I mean, it's a lot of stuff going on, but it looks so calm. Yes, sir. Huh?
Okay. I wanted to ask you a question. Have you ever, there's a lot of discussion. I lived at the Cambridge Zen Center. There's over people here sitting here. Live over in Cambridge, and there's a lot of there's been a lot of stories of people in the past that have done things like like healing feats and feats of being able to harness tremendous amounts of non-visible and non-quantifiable energy, so to speak, to be able to perform almost miraculous acts in a good way. What do you make of all that? The sort of the outside of the realm of physics and science energy.
Yeah. One of my teachers, yesterday, Roshi, used to talk about that. He said he would they would come up every once in a while. He died a long time ago, but I studied with him a long time ago. And he would say, you can practice, and there's ways of learning how to fly across the ocean. He said, but it's so much easier to save up some money and buy a ticket. So, yeah, you can do it. You could choose whatever path you want to follow and practice it. I was a magician. That's not those extra powers, but I certainly believe you can do anything you want to do. Go ahead and do it. I don't put anything special around doing any of those things or doing any other things. We all choose our paths, and they're all special. Everyone is unique. There's nothing unique about uniqueness. So there's nothing I don't believe in, and nothing I do believe in. Somebody shows me that they can levitate above the chair. Great.
Have you witnessed anything?
Well, I've witnessed people raising their arms. That's a miracle to me. So we all have our own definition of miracles. But God, waking up every morning. I prefer going to sleep every morning. They're all miracles. Yes.
Raise this money for their mandala beads. How do you balance raising the money to have this experience versus raising the money to maybe pay a bill to help someone stay off the street?
I never balance anything, so there's always a reason that I'll do things. I ask people that go in the streets, I haven't always done this, but in the beginning I did, and I recently haven't, and I should get back to it. I ask people, if you want to go on the streets with me, you have to raise a certain amount of money. You can't use your own money. You have to beg it from people you know. That's the first experience of coming out on the streets with me, because people think you're crazy. And that's what people think people on the streets are. Crazy. And I want you to experience some of the things that people feel. And coming on the streets with me, it is very important that I remember this guy Bob Schwartz, a millionaire, and he was coming on the streets with me, and he had to raise a lot of money to come on the streets with me. And I said, you got to ask your friends. And he said, Bernie, I'll just give you the money. And we use the money for work with homelessness. That's what the money goes for. But that's not the point. The point is, I said, no, Bob, you can't just give us the money. You got to ask your friends. He says, I can't ask my friends. How can I ask my friends to give me money to go live on the streets? They'll think I'm crazy. I said, I know, Bob. But you got to do it. And he did it. And that was as powerful an experience as the whole street retreat was for him, to have to go through that. So I do different things for different reasons. And it is a bearing witness experience. And you're bearing witness to different things. And it's a plunge. It's something which your rational mind is going to deal with in a different way. Yeah, but I don't balance things. I don't know what that means, balance. I'm sure there's some kind of rationale to balancing, but I don't know what it is. I take the ingredients, I make the meal, and I offer it. Is it a balance? How do you figure that out? Balance of what? Yeah. What do we do when we go on the streets? We do what most people on the streets do. You look for places to eat, places to rest, places to be. It's about all there is time for. You'll find out that it's very hard to sleep at night because there aren't very good places to sleep at night. So, and during the day when you want to rest, people don't like it, so they move you on. What's sort of fascinating is you wind up living in the moment. You're not planning you're not worrying about what the stock market's going to do or what you're going to do tomorrow. You're really looking, where can I rest? Where's a place to go to the bathroom? How do I get some food? I'm hungry. Now, when I organize them, I also ask people. We all sleep together at night, and we sleep in different venues because I want people to experience the different venues. Venues being the streets, bus terminals, usually not shelters. Springfield shelter is okay. New York shelters are horrendous. I wouldn't take anybody in there. So we do different venues, and we eat at different venues so that they can get an experience of how different kinds of people take care of you. I remember talking at a synagogue where the bar mitzvah kids all did social action work. And one of the things that this particular synagogue was involved in is what's called the Midnight Run, bringing down food at midnight to the homeless down in the Bowery. And I suggested that they also live on the Bowery for a day or two. To experience, I mean, it's a beautiful thing taking down the food and feeding people. But if you're one of those people being fed, to experience that youngster or that adult coming down and looking down at you as they're giving food to this tramp. Even when they mean it in such a beautiful way, there's still, you can experience this look like, oh, you poor pity thing. if you sat on that other side for a while, the way you would do the feeding would be completely different. I don't think there's nobody that's going to work for us in Springfield in a homeless work that has not experienced being on the streets. You can't experience being homeless because that's different. Everybody who goes on the streets knows they have a home. But you can experience being on the streets and what it feels like and how people treat you and the loss of dignity and all that stuff. And once you experience that, you will work very different than any social worker will work. Yes?
So I think what you're saying is that there's no substitute for experience. And I wonder if you've gone in and experienced a lot of different things in your life, flip things for yourself, that might not be necessarily considered Zen practices. Because
Yeah.
Can you expand on that?
I did. And we all do. Now, I'm sort of kind of a screwed up guy. I get drawn when I experience something that I can't understand or can't grok. I wind up spending time doing that. So, an interesting example. Well, interesting in that it's far out, but that happens all the time to all of us. We come across things that we're not ready to deal with. There's nothing wrong with the fact that we're not ready yet to deal with it. But we do all come across various things that we're not ready to deal with. Now some, it's unconscious and we don't even know. We just ignore it. And we don't see it. I had a cousin who lived in the Bowery in Chinatown. And she was a strong communist, socialist, wonderful liberal woman. And this was later years. She was an artist, and she was now older. And 2 blocks away is a bridge from Manhattan going into Brooklyn. And right to as you're standing in the street looking at the bridge, right to the left, there was a tented facility, homeless folks living there, with beautiful structures. It was amazing. She never saw it. She didn't know it existed. And most people that walked around didn't know it existed. It was right there. So there's a lot of stuff that we don't want to deal with that we just don't even know. We're unconscious to. And some stuff we see, but we mentally say, I'm not ready for that. I can't deal with that. And we're all like that. I have my own personal practice. When I run into things like that, I try to spend time there. I try to spend time there. I was taken down to by a friend who's a therapist in Zurich, and he told me about a place called the Letten. Zurich has a lake, beautiful lake, and there's a river that feeds into the lake, and pretty much where the lake is coming, where the river is coming close to the lake, on the bank there's some banks with a lot of space, and then it goes sloping up to the streets, and then the streets are by Bahnhofstrasse, which is where all the banks are, and it's the wealthiest part of Zurich. I mean, it's really a wealthy area, and those banks, are the kind of banks where you can launder money, and it's a free place. It's a great place. Well, Zurich, in its great liberal policies, decided to have an experiment of free drugs. And they made those banks, called the Letten, a drug-free area. They gave out, by the time they shut it down, because the experiment didn't work, by the time they shut it down, it went for about a year. By the time they shut it down, they were giving out 10,000 needles a day. So this friend took me down to visit the Letten. If you can imagine a football field that looks like a shooting parlor, it was completely packed. It's about the size of a football field, completely packed with people shooting up, dealers with money, with knives, with guns, people crazed eyes. And he took me through that, from down the slope, through the through the bank, across the bridge, across the river, to the other bank, and through. And the mind couldn't fathom what was going on there. Couldn't fathom. My mind couldn't fathom. So I decided I had to do a street retreat there, to try to understand what's going on here, to grok it. And I knew that out of that would come something. But that's my craziness. We all do different things, and we also avoid different things. And I avoid things, and we all do. And we all get caught into different things. But I do like to experience things. I like it. Yes, Chris?
Yeah, that story really struck me a few years ago when you started talking about it. But what about all the people that spend money and time, say, reading or going, see, Halloween's coming up now, going to horror movies and trying to challenge themselves or plunge into the world of horror, bloodshed, and slasher movies, and kids who spend so much time either on the internet or in front or watching videos and so on that are just grotesque. And why is that going on in terms of the hungry ghosts that you experience? And how does one plunge into that and create a ministry?
I don't know. I don't know. But you know, there are, as you do know, there are new young Buddhists that are playing with punk Buddhism and playing with those worlds. And I don't know the world that shouldn't be dealt with to try to grok what's going on and what should be done. So I haven't, but there are people now that are doing that, and I think that's important.
It's video games and it's Stephen King. Stephen King is considered a tremendously great writer, but I mean, give me a break.
Yeah.
All creepy stuff. Is it a waste of time, or is it really so decadent or so pathetic that this is what really adults and children are drawn to?
Yeah. So how do you work with that energy? You know, how do you understand what's going on there? Why is this such a... What's happening? That is, I can't criticize it. I can only say what's going on, and then how do I work with that energy? If I want to work with that energy in a different way, how do I start moving it and create... To make it real, I create another kind of offering which now will attract people to that offering. So people are being attracted to the offering you're talking about. Some people may like that. If you don't, if you're part of the group that says, I don't like that, make your offering and attract people to your offering. Use that energy. There was a wonderful guy that we worked with in Israel, a real liberal guy. If you want frustration, work in the Middle East, on any side, in any place. But at any rate, he was an ex-colonel in the Israeli army. In Israel, there's a phenomena that when kids everybody goes into the army. You know, everybody goes into the army. When you get out of the army, every Israeli kid then travels abroad and spends a year or spends whatever time. And usually in places where there's a lot of excitement and life-defying things. I mean, you know, all kinds of stuff. What he wanted to do, what he started to do, was offer an alternative. Because he said that what's happening is they're coming out of the army where you're on such adrenaline. And now the phenomena that he was witnessing that everybody sees there, and it's all part of the thing, you give your kids money to go travel for that year or whatever time it is until they come back, and then we'll start a family. Because they got to get rid of that adrenaline, and they got to do things that are sort of exciting, in a way. That was his thing. That's what he felt. So he says, well, let's harness that energy into doing something about the Israeli-Arab situation. Change it around. Take that same energy and say, let's be a commando, or something like that, you know. When I started to do my work in Yonkers, the first group we worked with people in the shelters, and we were selecting people to go into housing. We were starting to build housing, permanent housing. And the thing I did first is talk within the shelters of who would like to become part of a group of people that will change the homeless scene here in Yonkers. You know, take the energy and move it into a different way. And that's the group that happened. That's what we're going to do in Springfield. We're going to create a group of people. We're going to say, who wants to be part of a new scene to change the way homelessness is happening here? And let's do something else. So it's to offer something, offer an alternative, and see who wants to join. And if it's a decent alternative, it will grow. And if it's not a decent alternative, it'll die. And you did the wrong thing. Start again.
One more.
One more.
So, from what I understand, when you talk about bearing witness, there's a lot of emphasis on going to the site or going to the place. And how do you bear witness, or is it possible? It's not always appropriate.
You can bear witness to yourself. That's what meditation is. So meditation is a bearing witness, and it's a bearing witness to the oneness of life centered in yourself. You don't have to go anywhere. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you all for coming, and pay attention. There will be 3 other talks this year, and we'll advertise them in the same way.
Oh, and if anybody wanted
information
about us, there's some up front. And as Janet said, our website is zenpeacemakers.org.